Hi, everybody. Happy Friday the 13th. Welcome back to the MetaStellar YouTube channel. My name is Maria KOROLOV. I'm the editor here at MetaStellar. And today's top free speculative book on Amazon is a paranormal dystopia by New York Times bestselling author. But before we get into all that, we've got 4 of the books to talk about. You see, every single Friday, the team here at MetaStellar reads the first few chapters of every book on Amazon's top 10 list. And I was helped out today by MetaStellar community member Alex MUELLER, and Alex is here with us today. Hi, Alex.
Hello.
So the link to all the books is in the description box below, also to the article. MetaStellar is an online magazine of speculative fiction. All the short stories are always free. And we do have 2 anthologies out that you can buy, Year 1 and Year 2. We're now working on Year 3. And our fall submission cycle is open. If you are a short story writer, you have until the end of the month to get your short stories in. The link to that is in the description box below as well. Okay, let's get started with book number 5 on today's bestseller list. And here we go. Let me make that bigger so you guys can see it. It's the Dragon Blood collection by Lindsay Buroker. It's the first 3 books in the 8-book Dragon Blood series, which is a kind of an epic fantasy. The other books are $3 to $5 each, and they're not in Kindle Unlimited. So this author has been out on this list before a lot, and she's one of my all-time favorite authors. And she's also one of the hosts of the Six Figure Authors podcast. If you are a writer who wants to make a living from fiction writing, that is definitely a podcast you should be listening to. I have heard every single episode of it, and those guys are great. So I've read a lot of her books. I'm definitely the target audience for this one. And we previously reviewed this particular series ages ago. And so this is like a second look at it. And so it starts out with a fantasy world that has gunfire and also has magic, but it's a kind of straightforward fantasy setting. One of the people we meet first is Ridge, a talented military man who's sent to manage a prison of murderers and rapists as punishment for causing an international incident. And then a mysterious woman shows up who's been asleep for the past 300 years, and she's the last of a group of sorcerers who used to protect this realm from outsiders. And she wants to be reunited with her soul blade. And so her plan is to pretend to be one of the prisoners in this prison and build a relationship with Ridge and use that relationship to get to the sword, which is also buried under a mountain of rock. So it sounds like it would be sword and sorcery book and that there would be dragons, but no, it's a fake out. Well, kind of. It's a great series. I have read the whole thing. I read the first book, then I went on to read the second book, the third book, and like all the way through to the finish. This is more of like a military style epic fantasy, a little bit of romance, mostly a lot of adventure and a little politics. Very, very enjoyable. And so we go back and forth between the point of view of Ridge and Sardell, the sorcerers, and we learn more about the history of this world and their relationship. And she's been asleep for 300 years, so she has no idea what's going on. So we're learning about the world fresh through her eyes as well. And I love the fact that this fantasy recognizes that things change over time. Too often in science fiction and fantasy, we get these empires that last for 1,000 years and never change. Well, things happen, things get invented, politics changes, etc. Things always change. So I'm a little annoyed by that trope, and I'm glad that here that were significant changes while she was asleep. So I highly recommend this. And if you like this series, the author has more than 100 other books on Amazon. She writes hard science fiction, she writes urban fantasy, she writes more of a fantasy romance and a paranormal romance. And I've read a lot of her books, and like I said, she's one of my all-time favorite authors, and I highly recommend the series if you like epic fantasy, if you like strong characters who are competent, who are doing interesting things, and it's just great. And there's a war on, and there's enemies and all sorts of good stuff. I highly enjoyed it. Okay, next we have a book that's not quite as much up my alley. My Eternal Soldier by Krystal Shannon, the third of 7 books in the Sanctuary, Texas paranormal romance series. The other books are $5 each, and they're not in Kindle Unlimited. The first book in the series, My Viking Vampire, is also free today. So that's the one that I read because I don't want to jump into the middle of a series, and I don't want to spoil anything for readers who haven't read the first book. So, disclaimer, I'm not a fan of books with naked male chest on the cover. I'm not a fan of vampire lovers or Vikings. And so lots of minuses for me in this book, but I understand that for the majority of readers, those are all going to be pluses. So the book opens with Bailey. She walks into her living room and finds it a swamp of filth and muck. Turns out the sewage line in her apartment, in the apartment above hers, sprung a leak. But that's not the only problem she's having today. In the morning, she also spotted her abusive ex-boyfriend's car. He works in law enforcement, and no matter how many times she moves or changes her name, he seems to be able to find her. And that's just the beginning of the problems she has, because we're living in a dystopian future. There's a Texas Republic, and it's full of others, I guess werewolves and vampires, and the rest of the United States is trying to keep the others out, and they're basically dictatorships now. So she has to run again, and this time she has to leave all her belongings behind because they've been destroyed by this leak. So the story is very readable. I can see why the author is on the USA Today bestsellers. She's definitely a USA Today bestselling author based on her writing style. And I sympathize with Bailey, I really do, but I'm not a fan of books about women on the run from abusive exes, even if in the end they're able to turn the tables and fight back. I want them fighting right from the start and winning, and I want there to be lots of blood. So I am not going to stick with this book, but I think that everyone else might like it very much. And if you do, pick up the first book and the third book in the series, which are free today, and the links to both are going to be in the description box below. Next, we have a man who needs no introduction, Philip K. Dick, but I'm going to introduce him anyway. So this is a collection of 13 of his short stories. He's one of the best sci-fi authors this country has ever seen. If you're too young to be around when he was writing in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, he died in 1982 and wrote up until the end. You probably know him because his books and stories have been adapted into Blade Runner, Total Recall, Minority Report, Screamers, Paycheck, A Scanner Darkly, The Adjustment Bureau, and now the Amazon Prime series, The Man in the High Castle. So yeah, this guy is one of the founders of modern sci-fi. So definitely worth reading, especially if you're a filmmaker looking for something new to adapt into a movie. He's got a unique writing style, and it's not for everybody, but it is for a lot of people. He won a lot of awards. So if you haven't read his books, definitely pick this one up. It's an easy read. It's short stories. They're fun short stories, and it's a great time for the Halloween season in particular, because some of them have a little creepy twist. Like the first story, Beyond Lies the Wub, which opens in a village on Mars where animals and birds are being driven up a gangplank into a spaceship. Then one of the captain men's appears, pulling along a giant pig. He bought it from one of the natives for 50 cents. And the natives call this giant pig a wub. And once the ship is in flight, the men are discussing how they're going to cook and eat this giant pig, the wub. And then the pig itself speaks up. It's a sentient being, and it doesn't particularly want to get eaten, and it wants to have a chat with the captain about the whole being sliced up and eaten thing. And it's also very interested in philosophy. And like I said, there's an even bigger twist coming up. So great story, quick read, and definitely an easy way to get into Philippiadic. Next, we have A Grimoire for Gamblers by Amanda Creiglow, the first of 3 books in the Trove Arbitrations Urban Fantasy series. The other books are $5 each, and they're not in Kindle Unlimited. And Alex Mueller read this for us. Alex, what did you think about it?
Well, Maria, let's just say that when a man who's been committed to an insane asylum leaves instructions to have his house burned to the ground in his last will and testament, it's better for everyone to respect their wishes. Obviously, that doesn't happen, or else we wouldn't have this story. This story begins with our heroine taking ownership of her late father's estate, the estate that should have been torched, previously belonging to a father who spent the last 8 years of his life in an insane asylum. Fun times. But this house contains something very special. Everyone knows what a voodoo doll is. It's run-of-the-mill, boring, get it, yada yada. Well, this story has a voodoo train set. Knock the model off its tracks, knock the genuine article off its tracks. Now that is really fun. And that is exactly how our protagonist chooses to introduce herself. And really, what better way to introduce our hero than by having them be personally responsible for a disaster that could potentially kill hundreds of people? We all know what train crashes look like. Not that she's aware of it, of course. Clearly, a train rolling off its tracks just a few hours after she knocked over her dad's model is just a strange coincidence. And clearly, a string of suicides ranging 3 days before and after her father's death are just even stranger coincidences. That is certainly a mindset to hold on to, at least until the witch hunters start to show up. If you like grim modern fantasy, and if you like trains, then you're probably going to like this story. I like these things, and I'm looking forward to seeing where this story goes.
Hey, what's that on the wall behind you? Is that like a weird sword thing?
That's a batleth.
It's a what?
Batleth, a Klingon sword from Star Trek.
Of course it is. How did I miss that? All right, before we go on to book number 1, I want to thank our Patreon supporters. All the donations go to pay for original fiction. So if you're submitting a story in this month's submission cycle, you will get paid 8 cents a word, and those 8 cents are provided by these people. We love them, and if you'd like to join them, the link is in the description box below. Thanks, guys. You're awesome. Okay, now on to book number 1 on today's list, Taken by Fate by Shannon Meyer. Let's make that a little bit bigger for you guys so you can see it. There you go. This is the first of 4 books in the Alpha Territories paranormal romance series. The other books are $5 each, and the entire series is in Kindle Unlimited. The 4th book isn't out yet, but will be released in February, and you can pre-order it. So this is a New York Times bestselling author, and she's been on our list before. So the book starts out 15 years after the veil that separated our world from the next one collapsed, and humans no longer were the top dog on the planet. Instead, we've got fae, werewolves, angels, demons, and vampires, and they're now in charge. And in order to continue to exist, humans had to make some concessions. And those concessions are sometimes pretty brutal. So our protagonist is Bailey, and her friend Jordan, the closest thing she has to a little brother, has been captured by other humans in order to be turned over to the others as part of these concessions that the humans have negotiated. And she's been having trouble finding him, so in order to track him down, she lets herself be captured as well. So the book starts with her in iron handcuffs, one of a group of women all shackled together, being marched off to the auction pens. Some of the women are going to end up as maids to werewolves. That's the ending that Bailey is hoping for, because then she can find Jordan and then escape. Or she could be sold off to one of the other species, or tossed into the ocean as chum to be eaten by the ocean dwellers. So it's freaky, and the women around her are freaking out. In fact, one of the women next to her commits suicide by stabbing herself in the throat with a hairpin. Bailey tries to save the women, but she can't, and she bleeds out. But Bailey does get to keep the hairpin. So it's a pretty grim beginning. It reminds me a little bit of like the Hunger Games in style, but with a paranormal twist. It is very, very readable. I can definitely see this being made into a movie, although the special effects budget will be through the roof. So it's not really my genre. I don't like movies that begin so in such an unpleasant situations, in such a dystopia, but the writing is excellent. It pulled me in, and odds are 95% I'm going to stick with it. It's a great read. I highly recommend it, and it's perfect dark reading for the Halloween holiday season. All right, and I know my holiday season. I just came back from Salem. So Salem is nuts this year. The crowds are so packed. People stayed home over COVID, and now like everybody wants to be out there and seeing everything. And oh, it is awesome. I highly recommend it. Try to go before the last week of October, when it will be absolutely impenetrable. It'll be so packed. All right, so that's it for us for today. We're going to be back next Friday with more free science fiction and fantasy books for your weekend. If you don't want to miss any of these free Fridays, because you like getting free books every Friday, subscribe to the channel. And you can also subscribe to our newsletter and get this free Friday list in your inbox every Friday afternoon. So we do that for you because we want people to enjoy science fiction and fantasy. Okay, so, and we also have plenty of other stuff to read on our website as well, including 2 new fiction stories that we published this week. So check it out. Alex, thank you for joining me. I hope you're going to have a happy Halloween month.
I would like that too.
And I'll see you guys all next Friday. Bye-bye, everybody.